My name is Arthur Jones II. I'm a producer at CBS News, actually, in Washington, D.C. Born and raised here, grew up with Dwight, grew up in the Boys and Girls Club system. And then, like Dwight said, I went on to play football at Indiana University. This year, we were ranked in the top 10 the whole year for the first time in probably 100 years. And but now I do podcasting as well as my job at CBS. So for the past 5 years, I've had a show called Max Out Time with AJ2, which is a podcast that highlights success stories in order to max them out. And I like to do impactful interviews with people who have, done something in their lives. So I'm gonna actually share my screen with y'all. I've got a little PowerPoint presentation. We're gonna listen to some podcasts and talk a little bit about what makes a podcast before we jump into this whole 6-week series that I'm so excited to do with you all. Again, so I'm a producer at CBS News, and I also host a podcast. So I want to talk to y'all a little bit. Does anybody listen to podcasts? Anybody know what podcasts are? Have any idea what a podcast is?
Yeah, we know what podcasts are. I listen to podcasts.
What podcast you listen to?
The Breakfast Club.
Oh, the Breakfast Club. That's one of my favorites too. That's one of my favorites. Okay.
Gilbert Arenas got his own podcast.
Who?
Gilbert Arenas.
No Chill Gil. No Chill. Okay. Y'all know a little bit of something. Y'all know a little bit of something. So my man who keeps talking, who says they listen to podcasts, how would you describe a podcast? What is it?
It's they give you a freedom of speech. Like you basically talk about whatever you feel like talking about in the podcast. Like whatever comes to mind.
Like you can say whatever you want, what's on your mind. Like issues, like you really like you say, you really express yourself.
Expressing yourself, that's a good way to put it. So, I mean, one way that I love to express myself is through radio, journalism, storytelling, and story crafting. And the easiest way to do that now in 2021 is podcasting. It's the fastest growing type of media. There's over 1 million podcasts out there. Students and kids are really getting into it because all it is turning on the recorder, talking, expressing your ideas, your thoughts, your perspectives, doing interviews. And there's a little bit more that goes into that, but at its core, that's really what it is. So if you all like sports, I hear some of y'all like music, rapping, or whatever it might be, this is really the go-to extracurricular activity for y'all. Other than when I cross y'all up on the court, when I come down there, this is what y'all gonna need to do. So yeah, each one of y'all. So a podcast actually, so we break it down. A pod is a unit, and a cast is to broadcast something live through the internet in real time. So it's just a unit that's going and streaming visuals and images and audio. But the dictionary definition is an audio program made available through the internet that can be listened to or downloaded automatically by subscribers. So I'm going to play a little bit from 2 podcasts because I want y'all to be able to identify what goes on in podcasts other than No Chill Gil, other than The Breakfast Club. We're going to get you into some of the more advanced podcasts, some other things that you might not always listen to. So a lot of journalism publications, news publications, NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, they all have a bunch of podcasts, especially the audio programs within the radio side. So I want to play something for y'all from NPR's How I Built This. So did any of y'all eat Chipotle?
Yeah.
Y'all go to Chipotle? Right, I figured y'all did. So this is called How I Built This with the CEO of Chipotle. And just listen to it real quick.
2 people got sick with E. coli.
Were you freaking out?
Well, I don't know if freaking out is the right way to describe it. I mean, it was all encompassing. I mean, it was really intense. No, you wouldn't wish this on anybody, that anyone would get sick from the food that you serve them is really a tough thing.
From NPR, it's How I Built This, a show about innovators, entrepreneurs, idealists, and the stories behind the movements they built. I'm Guy Raz, and on today's show, how Steve Ells turned his love for San Francisco's mission-style burritos into Chipotle, a restaurant that launched America's fast casual food craze. So there's a famous TED Talk by a guy named Barry Schwartz. It's called The Paradox of Choice. And in it, Barry explains that virtually all current research on human behavior supports this idea that we humans, we don't really like to have too many choices. Anything beyond 4 to 6 actually makes us anxious and unhappy, which could help explain.
So that's a little bit from how I built this podcast. That was the intro to a mainstream podcast, one of the top podcasts out there. So this producer at NPR, he actually interviews CEOs, entrepreneurs, and leadership of different companies. So Chipotle, Peloton, Equinox, all of the top brands, all of the top brand businesses out there. He interviews them and talks about how they were able to cultivate their businesses. Any of y'all want to go into business? Any of y'all want to start one of y'all businesses? Yeah. All right, what type of businesses y'all want to start?
Well, for me, I wanted to start an electronic appliance business where I sell software and hardware appliances.
Okay, who else?
Actually, I want to do something like a boys and girls club, like have our kids in the community.
All right. I'm gonna go back and check and look if Guy Raz, the producer of this podcast, has interviewed the founder of Boys and Girls Club. Because if not, we're gonna get you on this show in a couple of years once you start your own. All right. But essentially, there should have been some things that you were hearing there. He used music. He used narration where you could hear his voice. He used an interview where he's interviewing the CEO, Steve Ells. He incorporated all of that, all at the same time, actually, to tell this story. So if you juxtapose that with Breakfast Club, yeah, they do the little music intro or whatever, and then you hear Charlemagne come in, and you hear everyone come in, DJ Envy. So there's different ways to skin a cat, essentially. But this podcast keeps you engaged with the music and with the different audio practices that he uses. So I'm gonna open up another one from the Washington Post.
From the newsroom of the Washington Post.
Washington Post, this is Colby.
Yeah. Hi, it's Stephanie McCrumman from the Washington Post. This is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Tuesday, January 26th. Today, the rift between schools and teachers' unions, plus how a new Secretary of Agriculture could open wounds for Black farmers.
Right now in Chicago, there's a big fight between the teachers' union and the school system. They are pretty deadlocked in how they should resume in-person instruction.
Okay, so what did y'all hear in that podcast just now? Just let me know some sounds that you were hearing.
I got one. I heard like a phone ring, and yeah, I heard that. Someone pick up the phone.
Yep, you exactly right. What else?
Music.
Say it again. You heard music. Okay. Something else? Anything else?
She just sounded like she was interviewing somebody.
Yep. So y'all all are right. Y'all are all right. They use music. They use the interview. They use the narration again. They also use what's called ambient noise. It was just what was happening in the room. She was answering the phone. Now, like I said before, this is the Washington Post. So essentially, they were trying to take you into a newsroom. And I work in a newsroom. Phones go off 24/7. There's always news happening, right? So she was answering the phone, and you could hear her about to discuss a news story with somebody. And then she went in and talked about the schools and what the episode was about to be about. And also, in addition to that, you also heard the ringing of the phone. I don't know if y'all heard that at the beginning. That's how it started, right? So when you turn on this podcast, you're thinking, okay, Washington Post, they have a news podcast, but it brings you right inside of the room. So let's take No Chill Gil, for example. Wouldn't it like, it would entice you even more if they took you into a game in 2005 when he dropped 30, and all you heard was the fans going crazy at the Verizon Center, is what it was called then. It's Capital One now. It's called MCI back in the day when Michael Jordan was there. I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. Y'all probably wasn't alive back then, but it's called MCI back in the day. But if it took you right into a game where he was dropping 30 on Kobe, right? The fans are screaming, you know, that is a way that I think he can make his podcast stand out, because people are tuning in to No Chill Gil because of what? All of those stories and that advice that he shares with his audience. What if he did that with the interviews and then incorporated clips from the actual game? That's podcasting. That's casting the audio and the visuals of the stories he's going to tell, not just using the interviews, because the interview can get boring at some time, right? I watch hour-long interviews sometimes. Sometimes you want to cut it off after 2 minutes. But if you're hearing the sounds of the ball dribbling, if you're hearing the sounds of the fans going crazy, that's how you spice it up. And when we do our podcast, I want y'all to spice it up as much as y'all can, okay? So if I hear ball dribbling, if I hear, desk thumping, if I hear, whatever it is, I want to hear more sounds, not just you talking to somebody, not just you talking about your stories. Let me get back into this. There it is. Here's a couple quick examples of other podcasts. So Serial is an award-winning investigative podcast. It's an episodic narrative. That means over the course of one season, it actually tells one story. So there's multiple episodes that tell one story. Investigative, award-winning podcast. These go deep into mysteries and murders and things like that. It's one of the top podcasts still out today. It's also one of the longest standing podcasts. So if y'all want to do, the Rayful Edmonds story, digging up things from, do y'all know who Rayful Edmonds is?
Yeah.
Yeah. If y'all wanted to do,
I know that.
Go ahead.
I know what that is. That's the biggest drug dealer that was in DC, but he snitched. Yeah. Exactly.
So y'all already smart. I already know that. So if y'all wanted to do an investigative series where for 6 weeks you followed different portions or aspects of Rayful Edmonds, right? That would have a lot of good sounds in that. A lot of good sounds, sirens and everything like that. That's what Serial is. They go deep in depth about some of these mysteries. Then there's a daily podcast, which I said before. New York Times has a lot of podcasts, and they tell the news every day. But they do it with a twist. So one of the top daily podcast episodes was actually about Breonna Taylor. Everybody knows who Breonna Taylor is now. They did a 6-part series, an audio series on her life. They interviewed people like her family members and police officers and people in the Louisville community about how that impacted them and, what transpired with the murder. Okay, so that was a really impactful podcast. And then I know y'all love sports, y'all love No Chill, but back in the day, Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, they were giving No Chill some bump back in the day. I don't know if y'all know them two, but they were like the bad boys. They played a little bit of defense. They don't play no defense in the NBA nowadays, but these two guys are both NBA champions, Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. They've got an amazing podcast. It's one of my favorite shows where they interview mostly iconic athletic figures, not only in the NBA, but just in sports in general and in the world. And they kind of tag team that. And then there's I Am Athlete podcast, which is one of the newest and fastest growing podcasts, which is a discussion that tackles important issues for NFL players. Usually it's Channing Crowder, Brandon Marshall, who was going crazy this weekend, Chad Ochocinco, and the OG Fred Taylor. They talk about sports, culture, but a lot of different things in society, like Black business, marriage and relationships. It's the first time I think that a lot of people have seen Black men open up and talk about some of these ideas. So those two are actually my two favorite podcasts at this point in time. Have y'all seen either one of those podcasts?
No, I never seen it.
Say it again.
I never seen it.
Never seen any of them? Okay. I'm gonna show y'all I Am Athlete.
Oh no, I Am Athlete. Yeah, I seen I Am Athlete with Chad Ochocinco. Oh yeah, I seen that. Yeah, I seen that. Yeah, I seen that.
I figured y'all did. What y'all sleep back there? I figured y'all seen it. I mean, it's going viral right now. You type it in right now, anywhere.
Brandon Marshall.
Brandon Marshall, yeah. Any of y'all play receiver? Y'all play football?
Yeah, Brandon Marshall play football.
Yeah, I'm talking about you. Do any of y'all play football?
I used to play football. Yeah, I used to play football. I play basketball now.
Oh, you switched up.
Go see the court life. I used to play football.
Why you couldn't play both?
I don't know. I just stopped liking football.
Okay. All right, don't say that around me.
I lost love for
Football?
Yeah, it's definitely a sport that if you're not in love with it, definitely get out of it.
Basketball better. It's not that one in love with it. It's just that.
I don't know, but that's a personal opinion. They both give you different life lessons. They both do different things for you. But we can get into that later. So now we're getting into the crux of what a podcast is. So now y'all know what it is. Y'all know what a podcast is, right? Y'all don't need me to run through anything.
We know what it is.
Y'all know what a podcast is. All right. So why would you even start a podcast, right? My main things are, why is this story important? Why is No Chill Gil taking out his time to do interviews and tell y'all stories about basketball legends, right? Why does the world need these stories? What I would tell y'all, if y'all wrote one thing down today and then listen to anything else, a podcast is about audience more than it is about self. The audience is greater than yourself. At the end of the day, the podcast is a service that you're providing for someone else. It's also a way for you to express your ideas, your narratives, and the things that you want to get across, but it's mostly about who you're trying to serve. It's about the listener. These people are consuming what you're putting out, okay? So I know Dwight listens to my podcast, so I'm always trying to come up with interesting guests that I think he's going to retweet and mention and listen to, because I want to give him some impactful stories for his life. And I think I probably have done it a few times. And that's what I'm going to continue to do because it's for the audience. Would you agree, Dwight?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would. Based off some of the podcasts that you have.
So yeah, it's a service for others. The audience is greater than self. If I can put that into just one sentence, that's what your why should be about. Now, here's a clip from one of my most recent podcasts with a young man who's probably about the same age as y'all. Roxanne told me that y'all enjoy music. So this is Elijah Woodward. He's a junior at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. He plays the alto saxophone. What do you miss about live performance? What was that feeling like a year ago when you were there in the moment at Busboys and Poet?
The energy. And because me and my band are so close, it's almost like a brotherhood. We're trying to, during that time, we were trying to strengthen that closeness. And I miss the energy that we received from the audience, and that we were able to redistribute through our music. That was definitely something that always has touched my heart since I was a kid, since, performing in the elementary school band, being able to see people hear us and being able to, to feel the energy pretty much.
So like most people out there, We can't do in-person interactions. That's the reason why I'm not there with y'all today. You know, he's an artist. He's a live performer. So over the last 13 months of this pandemic, he hasn't performed in front of anybody. He used to perform at Bus Boys and Poets. He used to perform in music festivals. And to me, you know, I was in musicals when I was growing up. I was in the choir growing up. I know what it feels like to be out there on stage. Also with athletics, I know what it feels like to perform in front of the audience, and to have that stripped away from someone who's dedicated their whole life to it. I asked him, what was it like? He said he missed the energy. He said he missed that interaction he had with the audience, right? And so for me, I did this podcast episode with him because he started what was called one song concerts, where he would play on his IG Live a song on his alto saxophone virtually for all of his followers. And it started to bring people together. It started to, you know, galvanize the community of people who can't go to live concerts anymore. It's kind of like the Versus series. Did y'all see, did your parents, were they playing the Ron Isley this weekend, Earth, Wind and Fire?
No. Oh, Earth, you said Earth, Wind and Fire?
The Versus.
I know Earth, Wind and Fire. I think my mother did play. No, I think my uncle played Earth, Wind and Fire. Bone Thugs and Harmony.
So I mean, it's been a bunch of verses. It's been a bunch of verses. I know y'all saw WAP and my man Jeezy. I know y'all saw that one.
Free Pugalo. The dirt.
So the reason why Versus was actually started was to bring people together a year ago, when we didn't have live performance, when we didn't have, you know, parties or anything like that. And so this young man who's about the same age as y'all, I was talking to him about that and why he continues to do his music. And I was trying to help my audience, you know, realize that we're all in this together. So we got a podcast that I laid out for y'all. Can y'all see the screen? Somebody who hasn't spoke, can you read me this summary? This is a summary of a mock podcast. It doesn't exist, but I made it up just for the purposes of this PowerPoint so we can get talking about how we're going to start doing these things. So somebody who hasn't talked, y'all screen is so small, but somebody who hasn't talked, just go ahead and read the bottom here where it says Teach for the World.
What you want us to read, the summary? Yeah, the mock summary.
Yeah.
I read Teach for the World podcast. Highlights teachers who are changing the lives of at-risk youth in public schools. Jack Reed will conduct one-on-one interviews with educators from around the world who are positively impacting some of the most vulnerable students. In this Spotify podcast, Reed and his guests aim to provide today's teachers with their keys to success. Broadcast from the Sony studios in St. Louis, Missouri. This hour-long show will be recorded live every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 Central.
All right, so I'm gonna get real elementary and basic on y'all. Y'all know what the 5 W's are, right? Who, what, when, where, why, sometimes how. Okay, so y'all learned that before. I don't need to go back. Okay, so John Wall, give me the win. I'm gonna call you John Wall. What's your name?
You talking about
Mari,
Mari?
pay attention, Mari.
He said John Wall. He said John Wall. Give me a.
No, that's Devin Booker.
He said John Wall.
You look like Devin Booker a little bit.
Like Devin Booker.
Look, go ahead to Kentucky and get you that bag. I'm not mad at you.
What you want the answer to again?
The win. What's the win in this scenario?
When can people listen? Oh, when can people listen? No, but you gotta answer based on the summary, bro.
Based on the summary, yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't say.
Hey, just look at the last line. Look at the last.
Booker, can you read the summary for me?
Oh, you mean read the whole thing? Read the
Oh,
whole
now
thing.
you gotta read the whole thing.
Read the whole thing again.
Loud too, big dog.
And no reset.
Tech for the World podcast highlights teachers who are challenging the lives of risk youth public schools. Jack Reed will conduct one-on-one interviews with educators around the world who are positively impacting some of the most vulnerable students on the Spotify podcast. Reed and his guests aim to provide today's teachers with their keys to success. Broadcast from the Sony Studios in St. Louis, Missouri. This hour-long show will be recorded live every day at 7:30.
So where's the way?
When does it take place?
Oh, well, every Tuesday at 7:30.
Be Eastern.
That's all I was asking.
Hey, okay, hey, smart.
And let me- all right, this one's a little bit, this one is up for interpretation. What is the what? What's the show about?
It's the highlight teachers who are changing the lives of hungry students in public school.
Oh,
Yeah.
Students with educators from around the world who are positively impacting some of the most vulnerable students.
Right. So these are I mean, you just gotta look at it. These are interviews where teachers are sitting down with other teachers and talking about their keys to success. How do they help students in the classroom that are struggling? Can anybody take a stab at why? Why would you start a podcast like this?
All right.
You said, why would we start a podcast like this?
Why? Let's say you a teacher.
Yeah.
Why would you start a podcast like this?
Oh,
To take care about my students.
yeah.
Not really.
And all the students around the world.
Exactly. Get it? Because the students are the future.
Yeah.
Students are the future. That's good. I like that. Students are the future. I might change the title of the podcast. Students are the future. Because to me, this podcast is about creating better educational environments so that we can create better students and better people for the next generations and so on and so forth. So if we get the best teachers on a podcast to talk, rap back and forth about their keys to success, highlighting what they did to reach the students who were struggling so much that they were deemed at risk, and then they turned them into, bright students, I think we could just make the world a better place because everybody would be, more on the same page. So if y'all are into education, if y'all parents or teachers or whatever, I'm licensing this over to y'all for $1 million. Okay, so if somebody takes this podcast and steals it, all you gotta do is pay me $1 million and I'll get out the way. So another thing that I want to do actually is, these are called 10-word descriptions. When you start your podcast, I don't care what it's about. When you start your podcast, you got to be able to say it in a succinct manner, right? So a summary is going to be like 3, 4, maybe even 5 sentences. The shorter, the better. But what's the point you're trying to get across? So for this podcast, Teach for the World, I'm thinking these three bullets. It's teachers sharing their strategies for enhancing the lives of marginalized students. Or you can think of it as educators who are exploring methods which positively impact struggling students. You can also, to think about it literally, educators are interviewing other educators and discussing how they reach their students, right? So within 10 words, all of these were either 9 or 8 words, you get right to the point, okay? So we go back to the summary. Can somebody tell me in 10 words or less, just a quick, what's this about, without regurgitating what's in the summary already? But if somebody were to come up to you and be like, hey, you're the host of Teach for the World podcast, what's your podcast about? How would you say that in 10 words or less?
You said in 10 or less words?
10 words or less. You can do it like this.
Teachers are going live every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. So they can
You
highlight.
can't.
I'm doing it though. Teachers are going live every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Hold on. Every Tuesday, teachers and students have one-on-one interviews.
But he said what it's about, not what time.
It's harder than it looks.
He said, "What is it about?" We go live every Tuesday.
What's it about? I'm gonna walk up to you and be like, "What's this podcast about?" 10 words. Once you get to 10, it's over with.
Teachers to help students from all around the world.
Say that again for me.
One-on-one interviews between teachers
That's 6.
to help the students all around the world. Yeah, that's too much. Oh.
It's harder than it looks.
One-on-one interviews
Okay. That's 4.
to help
6.
vulnerable students.
That's
Around
good.
the world. No.
That's straight. That's fine. That's fine.
Every Tuesday.
And every Tuesday.
That's fine. That's fine. See, it's harder than it looks, but the easier you can do that, the more times you can do that, and the more ways you can do that. See, I did that in about 3 ways. It's just you're gonna be able to talk about your podcast ad nauseum. Like if somebody comes up to you, it's teachers sharing their strategies about helping marginalized students. That's it. That's what it's about. You turn it on, and that's what you're listening to every single time. So who said they listen to No Chill Gil? Which one of y'all said that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. So give me 10 words since you listen to it so much. What's it about?
Oh, yeah, hold on.
All right.
It's basically about an ex-NBA player thoughts on the world. Oh yeah, that's 10 words.
Say what? It's an ex-NBA player talks what?
He said on the world.
Talks on the world. Okay. That's pretty good. You got 4 more, you got about 5 more words left. Can you give me a little bit more detail?
A little bit more detail.
'Cause what if I don't know what NBA is? What if I don't know what you mean by when you say on the world?
All right. It's basically about the ex-basketball player thoughts and feelings on the world around him.
That's 11. That's 11.
Oh my God! All right, that's it. On the.
I like that. I would, you said ex basketball players talks on the world around him. I would say on his life and career, right? Is that ex basketball player talks on his life and career? That's 10.
Yes.
That's 10. Okay. So now we gotten this far. Y'all know what a podcast sounds like. Y'all know what the top podcasts are, just a different variety of how you can do it, whether it's news, whether it's sports, whether it's discussion, whether it's investigative. Because my man said Rayful Edmonds snitched, so I want to hear that one. You know how to summarize a podcast. You know how to talk to people when they come up to you. What's your podcast about? You can say it. You can spit it out like that. So the next thing that you got to do before you actually start is trust the process. TTP, that's what I call it. So y'all know the Philadelphia 76ers has been trusting the process for about 8 years. They got the number 1 pick, after number 1 pick, after number 1 pick. They won like 9, 10, 11 games every year. But now they're in the top 3 in the East. They got MVP candidates. They got 2 top 15, 20 players in the league, right? Because they've been trusting the process, and they actually made this phrase what it is. What I mean by that in the podcast world is there's a stat that says more than 40% of podcasts are abandoned within 1 year.
Yeah.
So nearly half of people who start their podcast quit after 1 year. They can't take it anymore. They can't do it for whatever reason, you know? So just remember, you're going to have some trials and tribulations. There's going to be some hurdles that you're going to have to get through. You know, there's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys, just like anything else. But that's why you always fall back on your why. And that's why you always do these 3 things. Have faith, stay dedicated, and be consistent with it. Always be consistent with it, right? Your plan, don't ever give up on it. Don't ever give up faith on anything, right? Stay dedicated to it, whether it's a podcast, or whether it's you playing football or basketball. Doesn't matter. And be consistent always with this podcast. If you do those three things, you're gonna be trusting the process, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how many listeners you have. You know, the first 2 years I did my podcast, I probably didn't have nearly as many listeners and subscribers as I do now. But year 3 and year 4, thanks to listeners and subscribers like Dwight, it's starting to take off and do some really, really nice things. So just remember, at the end of the day, have faith in what you're doing, stay dedicated in what you're doing, be consistent always in what you're doing. And this ain't just with podcasting, this is just in life. All right. So if you want to be Devin Booker and put up 70 points one year, right, stay dedicated to that jump shot, because it's probably broken right now. I'm just messing with you. So now you're going to start your podcast. I sent these tools over to Roxanne the other day, but essentially the 4 components of a podcast is talking, listening, recording, and then editing what you recorded. So you're going to need a USB microphone. You're going to need some headphones. You'll probably need a laptop, you know, a portable or a computer at the very least, so you can record like through Zoom or anything, you know, any of these podcasting apps. And then you also want to be able to edit through things like GarageBand, Adobe Audition, Audacity. Have y'all ever recorded and edited anything on y'all computers? Audio? Nothing? Y'all never edited anything? I think y'all are muted. So I can't even.
I think we are. I think we do have that, yeah.
Have y'all ever? Yeah.
Oh my God, Roxy, put it on mute. Over here, maxing.
Wait, the mute button on the Roku remote.
Show Nick. Show Nick. We'll be coming back. Nick.
Have y'all ever recorded and edited anything?
Yeah, a little bit.
What do y'all use?
We use a camera. Microsoft.
Microsoft.
And I don't think we ever done something like that.
Don't they got apps for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they got apps.
Like photo editing apps.
I'm just asking. Yeah, all of that. So what we're gonna do for these 6 weeks is we're gonna use y'all laptops or computers, whatever y'all have there, and then we're gonna edit through these softwares every week, so we can get y'all episodes going. You know, so I'm gonna just run through these, and these are gonna be basically what we're gonna do every week. So at first, what you need to do with a podcast is develop your artwork or your logo. Right, the little No Chill Gill logo, the Breakfast Club logo. It usually incorporates the host in it. And then we're gonna make a description. That summary that y'all read for Teach for the World, y'all gonna incorporate that into your own podcast. Then what we're gonna do is start to get into the little technical, creating websites, you know, picking your host for the podcast, because your podcast can only be distributed if it has a host site. And you're gonna make a social media page for your podcast. You know, Facebook, probably mainly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, things like that, YouTube. Then we're gonna start recording some of the episodes that y'all are gonna do, but we're not gonna post them at first. We're just gonna share it with people that you know. We're gonna share it amongst each other. We're gonna discuss. We're gonna work through the ideas and then keep editing and revising some of the podcast episodes and interviews that you're gonna do. Then after that, we're gonna make like teasers, trailers, previews. So I'm sure all y'all saw the Space Jam 2 preview that came out this weekend, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
LeBron and yeah. So we're gonna do things like that. So a few weeks before we release the podcast, we're gonna put out a trailer. We're gonna put out a little teaser for each of y'all's podcasts on each of y'all's social media accounts, so that you tell your audience, your followers, your friends, your family that you're about to come out with this podcast. Okay. Then after that, we're gonna start releasing your episodes after we've edited and done, you know, a series of different episodes. And then after that, we're just gonna keep revising, editing, and promoting your podcast through social media and then y'all can take it from there and let it be what it is and go from there. So essentially we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that in 6 weeks. We're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be jam-packed. I'm gonna skip these slides right here.
If you are in education,
we're gonna do that for 6 weeks. I'm gonna come back next week and give you all the second portion of this presentation, but it's about 4:47. We got a few minutes left. If y'all have any questions or anything like that for me, I'm available right now, and then I will talk to y'all next week as well.
No questions right now. It was pretty cool though.
Appreciate that.
Like that. Yeah, if I do have questions, I'm gonna reach out.
Yeah, same here.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'll be back next week, same time. And then at the end of the month, we'll be doing this on Friday afternoons from 3 to 4. So come ready.